Ah, yes. Peace and quiet. Now that there won't be any more rush content, I can finally start relaxing. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. JC here with another video on Disgaea RPG. Today we'll talk about PvP. For some players, PvP is one of the most fun ways to test their abilities in a game. In Disgaea RPG, this mode arrived after the 2nd anniversary in JP, 1.5 anniversary for global. This mode is very different from what we have had so far. On most PvE stages, you fight against either a super strong boss with a couple minions or a bunch of enemy waves with a few quirks. On PvP you will fight against someone else's team. This will have huge stats, good equipment, synergizing abilities, powerful skills, and various alchemy effects. This may sound very intimidating, but if you start preparing, you may have the upper hand when it finally arrives. So let's check all the things that you should take into consideration for PvP. Starting with action gauge manipulation. The most important mechanic in PvP is definitely action gauge manipulation. The most common way to get this effect is by using alchemy effects, abilities, or skills. We usually go for damage increasing alchemy effects on weapons, and it's acceptable to have these kind of effects on your attackers. But that's not the only option. Action gauge increase at the start of battle is also a viable effect, especially for your supporters. Depending on how fast you are, action gauge reduction on normal attacks may also be a good choice, but I would advise against it for two reasons. If your opponent is also fast, it won't be as effective, and they may have action gauge reduction resistance. Now, for abilities, once again, New Year Rosalind is probably the best action gauge manipulation unit in the game, as she gives action gauge increase at the start of turn, which can make a huge difference. To replace New Year Rosalind, you will need another action gauge manipulation unit with a weapon with an alchemy effect which gives action gauge at the start of battle. Beach Lucy and Santa Serafina are just a couple examples of units that can fit into that role. To finish with this section, let's talk about skills. The first thing that comes to mind when we talk about action gauge manipulation and skills are those UC plus 1000 action gauge skills, which, yes, they are a thing and very useful, but they come with their own set of problems, mainly the lack of SP generation. This can be easily solved with SP regen supporters, which we don't still have in the game, but keep an eye for them. Also remember that there are other skills with action gauge manipulation. Supreme Laharl and Dark Santa Usalia both have a plus 500 action gauge skill, and Krichevskoy gives himself 75 action gauge with his cheap single target attack. With the right strategy, you can get a lot of mileage out of these kind of skills. Next thing on the list are debuffs. Unlike PvE, here you will fight a whole team of powerful enemies, which is why debuffs are more important in PvP. With how much damage enemy units can deal and their damage reduction effects, the easiest way to deal with the enemies is by debuffing them. Single target debuffers are not a viable option, so instead go for AoE debuffers like Ibar, Rubens, Serafina Zeno, and Summoner Adele. Depending on your strategy, you will focus on either debuffing their attacking or defensive stats, but I think it's better to debuff their attacking stats first to give you a chance of surviving before they take action. Not everyone has the setup to melt their enemies quickly, that's why you should also consider going the tank route. I won't lie, there are some disadvantages when choosing this strategy, mainly that your opponent will take more turns than you, but in exchange, you get consistency, as you will be able to survive their attacks more often. There is a wide variety of damage reduction alchemy effects, but the one I recommend is skilled damage reduction by 6%. This effect can go up to 36% if you apply it to every piece of armor. Obviously, you will need buffers, debuffers, and healers on this kind of team, as you will slowly build up your damage while reducing your opponent's stats. There's also the option to use a full attacker team. Usually, this wouldn't be a good idea, but in PvP, if you're able to take down the main attackers on a team, then you really don't need the supporters. Units with extra attacks on their abilities or skills are very good for this kind of composition, like Firelord Majorita, Floncilla, Future Warrior Plenaire, and Black Rabbit Usa. There are two possible routes you can take here, either equip them with armor, which increases their attacking stats and has damage reduction effects, or give them boots with ton of speed and starting action gauge effects on their weapons. To finish, let's talk about some notable units that work well in PvP. First we have Calamity Adele. He is an excellent DPS for this kind of content. With his cheap single target attack, he can keep attacking as long as he kills the target. If you want to use him, use the same kind of team you would use for most challenging content, 1 attacker and 4 supporters. You want to buff Calamity Adele as much as possible while giving him SP and then explode the weakest units in your opponent's team. Since his gimmick is taking extra turns on kill, it's best not to go for the main attackers or tankier supporters, because they might be able to survive thanks to their stats or awakening levels. Nissa released along with PvP for a reason. Her abilities and skills make her an excellent pseudo-glass cannon. She has a 1% chance of surviving each time her HP reaches 0, and this effect gets reduced by 20% each time it activates. But when it does, she gains plus 1000 action gauge and 100 SP. She likes the damage buffs, but not the defensive buffs. Instead of pairing him with Archangel Flown and Supreme Laharl, go for New Year Girl Laharl and Sapphire Xeno, as it benefits her playstyle. Summoner Adele is a very good debuffer for PvP, since he can remove the enemy party's buffs and debuff their attacking stats. You'll get more mileage out of him if you put him on an int team, as all of his abilities are int related, and he can even buff the int and resistance of the whole party for one turn if you need the extra buff. Last is Seraphina Xeno. Yes, I know in my previous video I said she wasn't really good, and that's true for PvE, but if we talk about PvP, then she's pretty good. She can debuff the defensive stats of the enemy's team while inflicting paralysis and reducing their action gauge. She's also able to buff or debuff the attacking stats of a unit. The debuff on her high cost single target attack has the added benefit of cancelling the target's buffs. If you are into PvP, then consider getting some of these units, as they will give you a huge advantage when PvP finally arrives. And that's it, guys. If you liked the video, share, like, subscribe. See you next time. Bye!